Hello, this is Marissa from Keys to the Kingdom, and I wanted to do a really quick video today to address something that has come up in the news today. And I'm curious if anybody has heard about it. I did post something about it today, but you know, Facebook discourages certain types of posts, so I just decided to do a video since the post will not be seen because Facebook will not show it. And I'm just gonna wait a little bit for a few people to come on before I get to the breaking news that was announced today. It wasn't really a surprise because we've been waiting for this, and we knew it was next on their checklist of, you know, their agenda. So it wasn't new news, but it's long-awaited, anticipated news. So I'm sure they're going to start moving forward with the next phase of whatever having to do with this particular subject. And after I discuss what came out in the news today, I'm going to read a section out of a book that I have because I want everyone to just be clear about what's really actually going on. And this ties into the studies that we've done in the past, having to do with the Book of Enoch, having to do with, well, the Book of Enoch, number 1, having to do with the fallen angels, and this is all going to tie in together. So for some of you, it might be new information, but I want to reiterate this fact, and I'm going to do that by reading a section out of a book that I just felt like perfectly describes what these beings are. Christina! Hey, Christina! Aren't you having lunch right now? Or working? Aren't you working? So yeah, I just want to I want to see if anybody heard what happened in the news today. Again, this is not new information. This has been long awaited information at lunch. But it's next on their checklist, so apparently they're deciding to move along with this part of the agenda. And like I said, I wanted to do a video because Facebook will not show the post that I posted. So I have to try to trick and bypass Facebook's algorithms to get information out, because if they don't like it, they just don't show it to anybody. And it's really just that simple. They just won't show it to anybody. But I could post something very meaningless and meager, and they'll show it to thousands of people. They have no problem with information that doesn't matter. So in the news today, for the first time in 50 years, Congress is meeting in an open meeting, all of Congress, to talk about UFOs. I'm sure most of you know, because of our studies having to do with the Book of Enoch and the fallen angels and the Nephilim, that this is probably not new information for you. And we've been anticipating this UFO agenda, alien agenda, fallen angel agenda information coming out. But like I said, I wanted to read something for you today just to kind of reiterate what these beings are and what they've always been. So this was sometime last year, probably maybe this time last year, that I was I don't know why. Sometimes I just get led to, I have a big bookshelf and it has a lot of books. that I no longer really pick up. They've been in my bookshelf for quite some time, and some of them I haven't really read all of them. Um, and this is one of them. I don't know sometimes what happens, but I just walked in the office, I looked at the bookshelf, and I was like, and I wanted something having to do with history. God was just leading me into like history. I like, you know, the older that the history is, the more I'm interested in it, because I feel like the farther back that we go, the more, or maybe better information we'll be able to obtain. So I was in the office, I was looking at the bookshelf, and I was looking for something having to do with history. I wanted older history. And I picked up this book. Just been sitting on my shelf. I don't ever read it. And it's just a book on ancient China. Just a history book, ancient China. Something prompted me to pick it up. Something prompted me to look at the index. I looked at the index, and immediately I was drawn to chapter 4. Chapter 4 says, "The Royal Sons of Heaven." Because I am keenly aware who the Sons of Heaven are, I had a strong interest in that chapter, so I turned to chapter 4 and I started reading. Well, in the first few paragraphs of chapter 4, it explains who these royal sons of heaven were to the ancient Chinese population. So I'm just going to read this out of chapter 4. And again, this, now, mind you, we're talking about like BC. This is like 23rd century BC. This is a very long time ago. Like a few thousand years ago. And so it says here, it says the monarchs of ancient China received their mandate. Okay, so the monarchs, the kings and queens of China, those who were ruling over China, received their mandate to rule from heaven. And you might read that sentence and say, oh, God gave them, you know, their mandate to rule. Now, yes, God does allow rulers to come into place. Of course he does. But this specifically mentions who their mandate came from. And it says they were men, but they were divine men. So these rulers, these monarchs, were men, but they were divine men. Okay, so this is, you're going to start to see something that's very, very similar to Greek mythology and a lot of other stories that are very similar to this one, having to do with why certain kings and queens and monarchs were ruling over certain countries and nations. So it says they were men, but they were divine men, and they mediated between their spiritual parent heaven and the actual world called under heaven. So these monarchs were mediating between heaven and people. This idea that a great power in the sky conferred upon one especially worthy Superman and his successors the right to rule all men goes back to prehistoric myths that conceal the beginnings of Chinese history. From ancient legends of awesome nature gods, oral tradition handed down tales of the first kings of all, the true sons of heaven. They were the ultimate patriarchs, the founders of the Chinese nations of the past. Because I was also very intrigued, because I was like, you know, China has always been their people, their population, they're a suppressed people. They've always been under sort of this communistic rule, sort of a heavy-handed rule. And I was, I was like, well, it makes sense that they are, because they kind of worship the dragon. I mean, they have parades and it all has to do with the dragon. There's dragons everywhere in China. Even at Buddhist temples, you'll find dragons. So it says they were the ultimate patriarchs, the founders of the Chinese nation of the past. In the fragments of ancient literature that remains, they appear as the offspring of the union of earthly mothers with heavenly deities. Okay, so in fragments of ancient Chinese literature that remain, they appear as the offspring of the union of earthly mothers with heavenly deities. That is literally what we see in Genesis 6. That is almost verbatim of what we see in Genesis 6 of the sons of men coming into the daughters of men and creating this new race of Nephilim. And this were the patriarchs of old of ancient China. So they were the offspring of the union of earthly mothers with heavenly deities, whose power showed itself in the thunder, whose majesty was represented by the sun, and whose grace revealed itself in the fertilizing rain. Direct descent from the sky god, the great source of fertility on high. Fertility on high. This is the same theme seen throughout all ancient cultures. They sacrificed their children to these gods. In turn, they were supposed to get, rain and, fertility. It was all based around sacrificing to the gods so that they would have, rain, fertile crops, and that their animals and their cattle would produce more animals. They would have lots of babies. So, direct descendant from the sky god, the great source of fertility on high, was the basis of all claims to royal legitimacy. So these the ancient Chinese royalty based their claims to where they were from these sky gods. So their source of power and their place in society as rulers were given to them by these sky gods. The early sons of heaven were believed to be endowed with extraordinary spiritual power, obtained directly from their heavenly parent. So they got this spiritual power from these sons of God that we know are the fallen angels. This enabled them to establish hereditary dynasties of holy kings. But the precious spiritual power was not passed on intact to successive generations. Gradually it dissipated itself until finally a king who was completely devoid of it inherited the throne. So basically this hybrid spiritual power was bred out over time. And so they had lost the sort of the powers that they had because of time going on. And I always said this and pondered this, saying that Messiah was sent during a time. These are just my own thoughts. These are just my own, what I felt were my own revelations to this particular subject. Having to do, because I always question, why did Messiah come so much later on? And I felt like it was because a lot of the Nephilim had been bred out. I felt like God was doing this big hereditary breeding out of the fallen angel DNA in society. So, and it even states here that it wasn't passed on intact to successive generations. Gradually it dissipated itself until finally a king who was completely devoid of it inherited the throne. So you have this king inheriting the throne who was completely devoid of any DNA from these sons of God that we know are fallen angels. Heaven then withdrew its mandate from him and bestowed it anew on a hero of a different lineage. Because, again, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, all of these ancient cultures, the rulers prided themselves on being descended from the gods. And we know that the gods were fallen angels. These were the third of the angels that came down and mated with humans we see in Genesis 6. They created the Nephilim. They were the reason for the flood. Yeshua says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns. The story of the evolution of the concept of kingship might be said to begin with Yao, one of the most ancient of the legendary rulers of primeval time. In the tribe myth, he was a personified mountain who towered over his waterly domain for countless years. Yao's frame, approached closely, was like the sun. Seen from afar, it was like a cloud. Later, he was represented as a noble, though extraordinary monarch who ruled during prehistoric times. Yao's most famous successors were Shun, who originally, it seems, was the master of the elephants, who lurked in the dark forests, and Yu, the Great, who made dry land available for the dwelling places of mortal men in the midst of the primeval waters. The primeval waters are the waters that had covered the entire earth. It says here, when widespread waters swelled to heaven, and serpents and dragons did harm, Yao sent Yu to control the waters and to drive out the serpents and dragons. So this is interesting because now I feel like it's mixing the fallen angels with maybe the non-fallen angels. Because it's saying here, when the widespread waters swelled to heaven, that's the flood, and serpents and dragons did harm, those were the, the dragon of old, the serpent of old, Yao sent Yu to control the waters and to drive out the serpents and the dragons. The waters were controlled and flowed to the east. The serpents and dragons plunged into their places. What those places are, I think the Bible says that they were bound underground. In this land, Yu the Great is believed to have established his Asia Kingdom, a society that may actually have existed around 2000 BC, but for which there is no archaeological or historical evidence. In the official accounts, Yu is described as a true son of heaven, born of a virgin who ate seeds known to us as Job's tears, that contained the divine sperm of the sky god. He is said to have passed the throne to his son, thereby establishing the first hereditary dynasty of true men. Over the centuries, traditional belief was to become indistinguishable from historical fact. And the naive tales of the first sons of heaven were led to the concept of the dazzling ruler of medieval China. One dynasty after another was to receive the mandate from heaven and rule China until its spiritual power had been spent. A decline that often existed only in the political propaganda of the successful revolutionaries who founded succeeding dynasties. I'm trying to see if there was anything else here. The most important function of the Bronze Age king was to communicate with the spirit world. The gods of nature, who were the source of his power and provided life-giving rain, and the ghosts of his departed ancestors, whose infinite wisdom guided his actions, he did this in a number of ways. From fragmentary literature of later times, it appears that the ancient kings were believed to be able to renew their heaven-derived power from liaisons with rain goddesses, so like nymphs clothed in swirling mists who haunted sacred mounts and mountains, clouding peaks and healing springs. So they're saying that they were able to renew their, because obviously, let's say you mate with a fallen angel. A human mates with a fallen angel, and they create an offspring, which is not either human or angelic, it's hybrid. So over time, as they are procreating, they start to lose. They start to breed out that angelic DNA, or those angelic powers, so to speak. Well, for them, it's saying they had the ability to renew their heavenly derived power from rain goddesses. So they would go into the forest, they would go into what the Bible used to call high places. This is where they would procreate in an ungodly fashion. Chinese myths that preserved faded remembrances of early religion abound with references to ritual mating of these goddesses with the king in the role of a shaman, the medium between man and the spirit world. So this shaman would bring the king and cause him to mate with a goddess. Which is interesting because we don't know of any angelic beings that were ever seen biblically that were female in nature. But this is Chinese folk. This is ancient Chinese history of how kings would renew that. So basically, they would once again mate with some sort of angelic being, and that would then create another hybrid, which would carry on this divine ability, this, so you would have hybrid DNA. And that was sort of the staple of being in a king or queen role in these times, was that your DNA came from fallen angels. So it says, so they would seek a shaman who was the medium between man and the spirit world. In such rituals, the king became the temporary embodiment of heaven and sought the love of a divine woman being angelic woman, who could hardly be distinguished from the ancestress of his own clan. Indeed, so basically she was able to take on the figure, you could say shapeshifter, was able to take on the appearance of somebody from his own clan. Indeed, the authority of the earliest Chinese kings appears to have derived as much from their intimacy with lovely female rain spirits as from their kinship to revered kings of the past. The archaic kings also got in touch with the gods of nature to make sure that heaven provided adequate water for the dusty farmlands of Middle Kingdom. In times of drought, it was the duty of the king to perform sacrifices to gods using elaborate bronze ritual vessels. It was also his function as the chief shaman to communicate directly with the sources of rain, high and low, whether in the form of a dragon, a rainbow goddess, or even the sky god himself. He could also seek the help of rain gods by staging a ritual dance in which the demon causing the drought was sacrificed. The king himself might participate in this ritual and dance under the hot sky, finally stripping off his robes and exposing his body to symbolic destruction by the blistering rays of the sun. In cases of extreme drought, a performer acted as proxy for the king, and after completing the ritual dance was indeed burned to death in a ceremony in which the earthly fire represented the solar fire in the sky. This important rite, modified with the rise of civilized sensibilities to omit human sacrifice and other barbarianisms, continued to be performed down into medieval times. So they continued on with this ritual in China. They just eventually stopped doing this burning sacrifice. The shamanistic role of the Son of Heaven as intermediary between gods and men was never quite forgotten. These communications with heavenly deities were equaled in importance by the exchange between the kings of Shang and the ghosts of the venerable King Tang and other royal ancestors. The records of some of these messages form one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of our century, the now famous Oracle Bones. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Oracle Bones, but apparently this is an archaeological discovery out of China. Just north of the Yellow River in the classical heartland of China lies the town of Anyang. There, at the site of the great city of the Bronze Age, were found many inscribed tortoise shells and animal bones. First sold casually as prehistoric dragon bones, these relics were later discovered to contain the record of messages between the living and the dead kings of Shang. When the king wished to consult the divine will or foresight of one of these exalted spirits, he had the royal diviner scratch his message on a flat, polished piece of bone, and the diviner then applied a red-hot bar to a hole drilled in the bone, and the intense heat produced a pattern of cracks. From this pattern, the diviner interpreted the reply sent to the king by his long-dead ancestors. So they were using shamanism to communicate with the dead, to receive these messages. That's basically what they were doing. They were just communicating with the dead, which the Bible tells us not to do. One worried question has been translated as, will there be any calamities within the next 10 days? How the diviner deciphered the spirit's reply is unknown. So basically they found on one of these bones the question, will there be any calamities within the next 10 days? They don't know how the diviner deciphered the spirit's reply. The answers were hidden in a pattern of cracks that the diviner usually had to take as meaning yes, no, or undecided. Faithful communication with ancestors was more important for kings than for ordinary people, because the king is ruling, he has to make decisions, he wants to be able to foretell the future. Their ancestors were more powerful and could have greater influence on the welfare of the whole nation. These ghostly forefathers were, in a real sense, the true rulers of ancient China. These ghostly forefathers, and we know that ghosts, demons, are the disembodied spirits of these Nephilim, because these hybrids, when you create or when you have this union between a fallen angel, an angelic being, and a human, and it creates a hybrid, their soul is not heaven-bound. So whenever they die, they're a disembodied spirit for some reason. Because they're not any creation of God, they're a creation of these fallen angels. So their spirit is lost. Their spirit is a wandering spirit. And these are the spirits that the ancient Chinese kings depended on. So these ghostly forefathers were, in a real sense, the true rulers of ancient China. To living men, they represented the great unbroken stream of life extending back to the hallowed past. They watched over the ritual springtime matings on riverbanks. They brought the seasonal rains that set the green shoots of millet springing in the fields of the farmers. They told the ancient kings and chieftains the best days for hunting, for sacrificing, for planting, and for any of the 1,000 ritualized activities that made up the lives of these masters of mankind. Around 1000 BC, the Shang dynasty collapsed. The last Shang ruler, the official ruler of the later times, said, was a man of great personal strength and eloquence, but he had allowed his court to become so corrupt that it engaged in indecent, naked revels. Such decadence was an indication that the spiritual power of the line had been used up. And finally, the king, abandoned by heaven, burned himself in his splendid palace. Heaven transferred its mandate to the house of Chao, the militant rulers of a small province to the west who swept across the Middle Kingdom and ruthlessly destroyed the Shang capital. The new dynasty was to rule China until the 3rd century BC. The men of Chao had their own revered mother, distinct from the deified mother of Shang. According to legend, she had stepped onto the footprint of a huge divine being and bore the totemic ancestor of the Chao line of kings. Later tradition was transformed. Later tradition was to transform a descendant of this union, Wen Wang, from a petty chieftain whose son led the conquest of Shang into a wise suzerain endowed with superhuman moral and political talents. And this is what it says here. It says, Wen Wang is placed above. How radiant in heaven. Although Chao is an old domain, its mandate is a new one. The holder of Chao, were they not brilliant? The mandate of God, is it not timely? Wen Wang descends to the left and the right of God. Gradually, said the official story, the kings of Chao also became corrupt and decadent. A legend illustrating their supposed irresponsibility tells of one King Yu who almost caused the overthrow of the dynasty of the 8th century BC by indulging the whims of a beautiful but capricious and unsmiling concubine with whom he was infatuated. Finally, the king thought of a way to make her laugh. He ordered the city's beacon fires to be lit, a signal to the feudal lords that they should rush to the capital with their armies to resist barbarian invasion. When the fierce barons and their troops converged on the palace at full gallop, brandishing their swords, and found nobody to fight, they looked so ridiculous to the lady that she laughed merrily. Soon afterwards, a real invasion took place and the flares were lit, and this time no help came and the city fell. Trying to see if there's anything else in here that's worth mentioning. But it's all very similar. You have these ancient Chinese cultures, these dynasties, and it's very similar to all of the ancient cultures around the world. They received their mandate from these gods of heaven, and once their bloodline sort of dwindled or ran out of this power, they would use a shaman to bridge heaven and earth so that they could remate with one of these heavenly goddesses. I suppose to create a new line of hybrids that would have these powers again. So, I don't know that I need to read. There is some more here, but I don't know that I really need to read all of this. like I said, this was just an ancient China book, and I just opened it up and wanted to read what this chapter on the royal sons of heaven were. And again, nothing that we haven't heard before. We hear this through all the other ancient cultures. This just solidified, what we already knew about how the sons of God came and mated with the daughters of men and created these hybrid beings, which were considered demigods. That's another word that's used, particularly in Greek culture. They're called demigods. So you were half angelic being, half human. And they had these powers. And these powers are what gave them the abilities to rule and know things. And so when you hear on TV that Congress is getting together in an open discussion about UFOs, it's not UFOs from another planet. It's not, these beings that from a far, far away galaxy, and they're just monitoring our planet, and they're just, visiting us because they want to save us from our own destruction. Because that's always been the sort of the narrative, is that these aliens are here to save us. They always paint this savior picture. They're here to save us from ourselves because humanity is going down into itself, and we're, World War III is gonna happen, and they're here to save us from destroying Earth and all of this mumbo jumbo. And that's not what it is at all. And this is so I say all that to say that although they're going to successfully convince people that, well, they already have, most people, if you ask them, I think they did some sort of a study where they asked people if they believed that aliens were benevolent or not. They all said that they believed that they weren't here to hurt us, that they were here to save us. And so this is going to sort of open that door into the revealing of the man of lawlessness and, the Antichrist and all of this. And so then we see all of the nations of the earth are going to go to war with the Messiah at his return. So the Messiah's returning, and we see that all the nations of the earth are going to war against him. So, basically they're painting these fallen angels as these benevolent beings that are here to save us, because the Antichrist is going to be the savior, right? And then the Messiah, when he returns, is going to be painted as some sort of fallen angel who's here to hurt us. He's actually the evil alien, and this is how the story goes. Space aliens aren't real because we live under a solid dome. If anything, they reside in oceans. Yes, Amanda. I actually agree with that subject. I don't believe that we live on a globe spinning 1,600 miles an hour, barreling around the sun, that's inside of a solar system, inside of a galaxy, inside of galaxies of galaxies of galaxies. Yeah, so Amanda's referring to the firmament. The firmament was well known in Hebrew culture to be a solid structure. The firmament was the dome and was a solid structure. You can look up the word firmament in your Strong's Concordance, and it will say a solid structure. When we read in the book of Job, it says made of molten glass, something that is hard, molten glass. That does not mean the ether, which is just, air and nitrogen and oxygen and, and then you're in outer space. I personally, now this is not, we don't have to agree on this, it's not, the reason I think it's important to know that we're not on a globe inside of a solar system that's going around the sun, inside of a galaxy amongst millions of galaxies, is because that is the teaching that comes from NASA that was given to, that has been perpetuated, because with that teaching, it's very easy to believe that there are aliens from another planet, instead of them being fallen angels that we've always known that they were. B'nai Ha-Elohim, which are sons of God, that chose to come down and mate with human women and create hybrids, bringing angelic technology. And yes, they were... Amanda, you're absolutely right. I actually just told the story to a friend of mine because she said they reside in the ocean. Yes, they live underground. They live under the ground. I mean, if you read your Bible, it says that the angels were bound under the earth for a time. It was 70 generations. It was 70 generations at a certain point, and I believe that the that in the timeline that ended at the start of the 20th century. And that's when we had all of this explosion of technology. It just came out of nowhere. Boom. Just an explosion of technology. Hey, Tiffany! And, you know, and then all of a sudden we're just, you know, they call it the 500-year leap, where we just had an explosion. The 5,000-year leap, where we had an explosion of technology just appear at the 20th century, right when the right when the angelic beings were supposedly let loose. And so I was actually telling a friend just a minute ago, that's interesting that you brought that up, Amanda, about how they live in the oceans. Well, a couple years ago, I did a video on the book Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. William Cooper was in the Navy, and he had a radio show for a long time. This was before Alex Jones came on the scene. William Cooper was the one telling people about the Illuminati, the Masons, the you know, the corruption in government, the secret societies, aliens, and whatnot. So he was the one that was actually coming out with all that before Alex Jones ever did, and Alex Jones kind of did towards the end of William Cooper's life. And William Cooper tells this story in that book, Behold a Pale Horse, of when he was in the Navy. And there was a time when he was in the Navy that he was aboard a ship, aboard a vessel. And it was his duty to, he was monitoring, I can't remember if it was starboard or, it was the front or the back of the vessel. And he was keeping a lookout. He was looking out for other vessels or crafts because, you know, he was they were monitoring their the space to make sure that there wasn't any intruding vessels. And as he was looking out with his binoculars on the back of the ship or the front of the ship, I think it was the back of the ship, he literally saw the water, the ocean. I believe they were in the Pacific Ocean at this time. I would have to go back and confirm that. I believe it was the Pacific. And the water opened up, and this UFO craft, I say UFO craft because it's the typical craft that you normally see in reportings, comes out of the water and flies up into the sky. Disappears. And then the same craft comes barreling down, and it spins on its axis doing somersaults, and then goes into the water again without a single splash. The water just opened up in front of it and then closed, and didn't really cause too much of a too much of a splash or water to go up into the air. The water just kind of opened up and the craft went into the water, and then the water just closed up over it. Well, when he reported this to his commanding officer, after they went back to land and he was called into an even higher up in the naval regiment, he was called into his office and he asked him to tell him what he saw. Well, William Cooper went on to explain what he saw. He was telling the story of what he saw. Well, the gentleman, sort of in a more deeper and toner voice, a more stern voice, said, "No, what did you see?" William Cooper went on to explain what he saw. Then he interrupted him again a third time and said, "No, William Cooper, what did you see?" As this went on, he kept interrupting him and asking him again, "What did you see?" And William Cooper began to understand that he did not want to know what he actually saw. He wanted him to say something else, which was, "I didn't see anything." So he left the office telling the gentleman, "I didn't see anything." Because he would have been reprimanded, he would have been gagged, had he continued on with his story. And it was then, not long after that, I believe, when he left the Navy, that he started his radio show and began to tell people about, the government and the Illuminati and, fallen angels and aliens, and their covering up of sightings of UFOs and all of this. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they were definitely under the water, under the ground. We know that there are caves and tunnels under the earth. It's, I don't know if you've ever heard of the hollow earth theory, but that the earth is not, just like solid underneath. There's a lot of tunnels and hollowness that are under the earth. I was also talking to my friend about how if you study South America, particularly Peru, Brazil, Argentina, a lot of these countries that have a lot of thick embedded history of giants and fallen angels in their ancient cultural stories, they also talk about these beings being underground. And when the Catholic Church was sort of colonizing South America, basically every time that they would find a mound that had giant skeletons buried there, or if they found, or whenever they found these underground caves that also contained giant skeletons, the Catholic Church would build a cathedral right on top. So almost all of the oldest cathedrals and Catholic churches in South America are built right on top of these giant burial grounds and these underground tunnels. And some people have actually gone down, because they go down into these underground caves, and some people have taken pictures of them. And whatever was found there, the Catholic Church would take, and it would just disappear. They would never see it again. These people would come and they would dig these things up, and they would report as finding them. These archaeologists, they would come, they would find these things, they would dig them up, they would report them, the Catholic Church would come, take them, and then these things would disappear, never to be found again, never to be put on display, never to be put in a museum, just disappearing forever. So I bring all that up just because, they're now starting to come out. Congress met today. If you missed it from earlier on, Congress met today for the first time in 50 years to discuss UFOs. It's an open congressional discussion on UFOs happening today. And so we knew that this was coming. This was part of their checklist. We actually thought it was going to happen last year. It kind of did a little bit. Something stopped it. I don't know why. I think they were just waiting for more COVID control, maybe. Maybe for people to become more, desperate for answers, looking for, these saviors to come save us. They do everything strategically. So now that is starting to unfold. And now we're going to see more and more of the alien UFO unveiling. They're unveiling all of this information. We're going to see probably more things become declassified. Maybe even like real, true, unclassified documents shown. Hopefully. Not that it matters to us, but this is what's happening. So this seems to be the next stage in the agenda, is their unveiling of the UFO alien information, and then they're going to carry on with however they're going to characterize these entities. We know that the Catholic Church for a very long time has been slowly over time stating that, oh, if UFOs wanted to be baptized, we would baptize them. And then first the story was out of the Catholic Church. If UFOs or if aliens want to be baptized, we would be happy to baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And then the story changed, and it started to become, well, if these beings are from another planet, they're probably more higher on a spiritual level than we are. Maybe we shouldn't baptize them. Maybe we should listen to them as far as what, and learn from them what their spiritual nature is. And maybe they're more wise than us. So that story shifted from we would baptize these entities to maybe these entities are on a higher spiritual level than we are, so we should learn from them. And this Pope that is currently active now has pretty much kept with that same agenda, and has no problem, accepting them. I don't think this Pope has any problem with rolling the red carpet out for any fallen angel, UFO, alien entity and welcoming them, with a welcoming committee. I don't think he has any issue with that. In fact, I think he embraces it and loves it, and whoever comes after him is going to be probably even more so. So I just wanted to make you aware of this. Because I tried to post a post on Facebook with the news clip of what was happening today in Congress with the UFO meeting. But of course, Facebook doesn't like it, so it won't show it to anybody. So I had to do a video. And I just wanted to read to you what was in this book. I thought it was interesting because, once again, it's just another culture that confirms that their history of dynastic rulers were put there by the sons of God. And they mated with them to create these mighty rulers. These mighty men of old. Where have we heard that before? So nothing new under the sun. We're just entering into the days of Noah. That's all. And look, it doesn't bother me. It really gets me excited because this is why it gets me excited. Because you and I have a job to do. God has us here for a purpose and a reason. And he has you in a position to gather and harvest people in this last harvesting, so that we can bring more into the kingdom of God before this last act of God's unveiling story and restoration of humanity is over. And before this major deception, there's been a lot of deception going on since forever, but before this major deception of them convincing people that the anti-Messiah is the Messiah and he's worthy to be worshipped. That's the main deception of all deceptions, is that Satan is Messiah. And so we want to keep this in the forefront of our minds and our hearts and our beings so that we can share this with others. You just want to share this with other people who, most people, they believe, particularly people who, even people who are in the believing world, it just boggles my mind that they're falling for all these things. But yet it doesn't surprise me. But, these people who don't know God, they believe that these beings are here to save us. They believe that these beings are saving us from ourselves and, because we're going to destroy ourselves with war. So they're here to stop us from destroying the planet and all of this stuff. So just remember to have these conversations with people that you know. Have these conversations with coworkers, just bring it up in conversation. Who cares? The time is so short. Like I said in I think it was a couple of videos ago, I used to be very careful about when I said things. Like I wanted to wait for the right time and I wanted to wait for maybe someone else to bring it up. Now I don't really care. I'll just tell them the time is so short. It's just like, get the plant the seeds. Like I was sprinkling seeds before and now I just want to blow. I want to get like a blower and just blow seeds everywhere, hoping that they land and fertilize on some fertilized soil. Because the thing of it is if somebody doesn't hear it from you, they may never hear it. They may never run across a video that speaks the truth. They may never run across a person that tells it from that angle where, they're not aliens, they're fallen angels. We don't live in, we're not barreling around the sun. We live in an enclosed world that Yahuwah created, that God created for us to live in. And there are no aliens from outer space. That's what, that's what these people believe. They believe that because they've been taught about the globe, and there's millions and billions and billions and billions of galaxies and stars. Of course there has to be life on other planets. How could there not be? Shame on us for how prideful of us to think we're the only ones in the whole universe. And there's no other life. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you look at it from that perspective, why unbelievers would believe that these beings are, just some other creation out there. So speak to people, have those conversations if you can. Say, look, that's not really what's going on. Like they're, sons of heaven. They're the fallen angels. The Bible talks about the fallen angels. Almost hardly any pastors talk about fallen angels in the Bible. They don't talk about Genesis 6. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Angels mated with humans and created Nephilim hybrids, and this is the reason why God had to flood and kill every single person on the earth, including animals? And Yeshua said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns? Like, why are you people not talking about this? Why are pastors not talking about this? Do you know how much more interested non-believers would be if this was the dialogue that was going on inside of churches? If they were actually talking about things that were interesting? I'm not saying that it's not interesting what they're talking about. I'm just saying that there's like, to an unbeliever, and you're just talking about, because, they just stay in the New Testament. They don't hardly even read the Old Testament. There's stories of, Goliath was a giant. How do you just like read that? So, these pastors, they say, David, he picked up stones and he slew Goliath. And it's like, you don't stop and pause to talk about the fact that he was a giant person. There's a story in the Bible of a king whose bed was, I can't remember the verbiage that the Bible uses, but it talks about how it was like 15 feet long. this bed. The king of Og, I think it was the king of Og. And of course, those were giants. Those were Nephilim. And his bed was 15 feet long, this king. And people and pastors don't talk about it. This is interesting stuff, and it's very important to be talking about it in the last days, because as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns. I mean, never mind that the book of Jubilees that we did a study last year, and we got through, I think, half of the book of Jubilees, and we might pick up that study again from where we left off. But the book of Jubilees actually says, they were mixing and genetically modifying plants and animals. I mean, it just says it verbatim. They were genetically modifying plants and animals. And what are we doing today? We're genetically modifying plants and animals, and now we have these. I mean, how can you not mention the fact that every time somebody, I've gone through a lot of these accounts and stories of people who have been abducted by aliens, and a lot of them have to do with them genetically having to do with fertility, and they would take a woman's ovaries, they would take men's sperm, and they're genetically modifying stuff. There's people who have been abducted who actually have given accounts of them seeing their offspring. So their son or daughter that was created after they took their ovary or eggs or sperm from the man. And then later on, because when someone is abducted, they're abducted pretty much their whole life. Like they don't stop. It's like it keeps going throughout their whole life, on and off. They're always revisited, and they tell these stories of being taken aboard a ship and being shown their offspring, and they look sort of like half alien, half human. So there's literally the same thing going on as it was in the days of Noah. It has been going on the last 100 years, and pastors aren't talking about this. I mean, it's right there. It's right there in the Bible. Yes, missing whole point. David slaying the giant. How many pastors use Goliath and Nephilim in same message? Yeah, I mean, they just kind of tell the story and gloss over it, but they don't stop and say, yeah, angels mated with humans, and it created giants, and God had to destroy the whole earth because evil was continuously, because the giants were now the rulers. These were the rulers of old. These are who these ancient civilizations worship. These were the monarchs of ancient China and all of these other ancient civilizations. And they, then began tainting all of mankind. And a lot of atheists are atheists because they believe God was a mass murderer and just killed a bunch of people in the flood. Or that God was a mass murderer because he sent Israel into the land of Canaan and it says murder the women and children. Don't forget to kill all the women and the children and the animals. So you have atheists and unbelievers who are very much against God because they think he's just some wrathful mass murderer who was killing women and children and animals. I mean, who would worship a God like that? But they're not understanding that these women and children were literally hybrid beings. That these animals were literally genetically modified. There was no saving them. You cannot save something that was created by man and not created by God. It is a perverted creation that cannot be saved. It doesn't, I don't even think it even has a soul at that point. It's soulless, or it certainly doesn't have any type of spirit that can go back to the Father, which is why these entities, when they died, they were called these disembodied spirits. So when you have demons or ghosts, those are the disembodied spirits of these Nephilim who are wandering the earth. That's why people are able to be possessed by a demon, because they no longer have a body. They have to try to influence and channel and enter a body that is human, that they can influence and act through, because they don't have any body of their own, and they are wandering the earth. They're aimlessly wandering the earth in a disembodied state. I mean, don't these pastors question, like, when Jesus was delivering people from demons, how come these pastors don't ever say where the demons came from? Where did these demons come from? How were they created? What are they? How did they get here? They say words like demon, they say words like Satan, but they don't tie everything together. And this is why people are confused, because they don't tie it together. And it's important to do that, particularly if you want to witness to somebody who's an unbeliever, somebody who believes that, you know, in New Age, or they believe in other religions, or they just believe, you know, whatever they want to believe. This right here, this conversation that we're having, this is what's really going to help solidify it for them. Because if you try to just witness to somebody by saying, oh, God loves you and he wants to save you and he died for you, unfortunately, okay, here's the thing. When I first started really walking with God, it was just like, boom, I just repented and my life was turned around, and boom, I was just on fire for God. And then that was it. There was no like slowly coming to God. I encountered God, boom, I was on fire, and then that was it. But the first thing he showed me was, because I love to fish. Me and my husband, we have a boat. I've been fishing since I was a very little girl, and I like to catch fish. I live in Florida, so I grew up fishing in saltwater, freshwater, you name it. And the first thing God told me was, just like, you know, he told me, he says, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. How does one fish? When you fish, you use different bait. Some fish like fresh bait, some fish like shrimp, some fish want an artificial lure. Have you ever seen a tackle box? There's different lures in the tackle box. You've got worms, you've got lures that look like fish, you've got lures that look like shrimp. You have shiny ones, gold ones, silver ones, sparkly ones, you know, bright pink ones, bright yellow ones. Different fish are going to look for a different type of bait. And sometimes you use squid on the bottom of the ocean floor if you're, you know, fishing for a different type of fish like grouper. So God was showing me, when you're witnessing to somebody, you can't just use the same lure for each person. You kind of have to get a feel for that person and then start witnessing to them based on what bait you think they're going to take. God used that analogy for a very specific purpose. I will make you a fisher of men. So he said to me when I first, you know, turned my life to him and gave my life to him, the first thing he said was, how do you fish? Remember how to fish. How you fish for fish is how I want you to fish for people. And this particular lure, this conversation that we're talking about, is a very, very good bait, if you will, for certain types of worldly people. They will, I mean, I'm not saying there's not people that won't, you know, you can't witness to them saying, you know, there's lots of different ways to do it. But you can't just say, you know, you need Jesus, you know, because, you know, otherwise you're not going to heaven. That doesn't work for people. I don't know any person that personally, maybe this has happened to people, but I don't personally know anybody who came to God because somebody told them, you need Jesus, otherwise you're going to hell. You're not going to go to heaven. He's coming back. You kind of want in on this thing. I don't know anybody who was like, oh, wow, that's, you know, you're right. No, you have to get to where, get on the level that the person is at. And on, you know, and in the modern world that we are in today, this topic right here, this is going to get a lot of people's attention, especially with this UFO stuff coming out in Congress and in the government. When now the government is unveiling and releasing, you know, documents that were classified, you got to have an answer. You got to have an answer because people are going to have questions, and the nature of unbelievers is to worship these beings. They're to think of them as gods, because this is what has always been. People have always worshiped them as gods. Just like I mentioned in this book and every other civilization, they have always worshiped them as gods. So that's exactly what unbelievers are going to do, and even some believers are going to do, because remember, the Bible says the deception is going to be so big that even the elect could be deceived. Even the elect could be deceived. Amanda said, right, 501c3 churches are so watered down and not edifying at all. No wonder why most people don't go to church. Yes, it's so true. Don't ever get a 501c3. It's literally you signing your rights over to the government. I know a lot of people who came to truth from learning biblical cosmology. Yes, a lot of people have come to the truth because of biblical cosmology. I won't get into that because that's like a whole other... I'm actually making a video about that. Tiffany, what book? So I read earlier from this book, Ancient China. You'll have to go back to earlier in the video, but it's just a book that I had on my bookshelf that I never read. And God just prompted me to pick it up one day and read it. But this conversation, this is the conversation that you want to be able to have with people. This is the lure that you want to be able to use when you're fishing, because yours, and my job is to win souls for the kingdom, is to harvest in the field, to bring in the harvest. And we're not bringing in the harvest with, you know, if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell, and you're not going to go to heaven, and, you know, Jesus loves you. It's not going to happen. It ain't going to work for people. People are very deeply ingrained in New Age. They're very deeply ingrained in Eastern religion, witchcraft. So you gotta hit them with this truth right here. Like, this is like my favorite lure to use these days. And again, it depends on the person. Get a feel for the person. Will this scare them away, or will this interest them? I would say 9 times out of 10, this topic right here will be, you will have success in your fishing endeavors by speaking about this truth, that there are no aliens. There's always been fallen angels. They mated with humans. They created Nephilim. Those were the mighty men of old. Ancient religions, ancient societies. As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns. We are in those days. They were genetically modifying food and animals and people. And here we are today. I mean, that right there is my favorite lure to use. When you're fishing, use this information, because this is relative to today, because we're in those days. We are in the days of Noah. So it only makes sense. And people need to know this because they're not going to hear it. They're not going to hear it. They're not going to hear it they're certainly not going to hear it from their pastors or their rabbis. They're not going to hear it from, they might come across something on YouTube, but if they come across something on YouTube, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to tie it into the Bible. It's going to lead them down the path of aliens are our savior and they're from another planet and all of that teaching. So I think it's really important for us in our witness to other people, in our trying to bring in more from the harvest, that we bring up this topic in conversation. Don't be afraid to bring up this topic in conversation, because guess what? They're talking about aliens, but they're not talking about aliens the way that they should be talking about aliens, and they're not looking at them from the perspective that they should be, which is a biblical perspective that pastors don't teach about. So believers, because pastors don't talk about it, are now in a position to not bring in the harvest. Because they don't talk about this, there is a huge group of people who aren't going to be able to get saved because believers are not equipped with the proper tools or the proper fishing lure to catch these people who are unbelieving atheists or in witchcraft or New Age. You know, because if you're not in the Bible, you're not mostly, you just have your own ideas about God, or you're in New Age. New Age is huge. It's a huge movement. And the New Age movement is what's teaching this. This is what they call the Christ consciousness. The Christ consciousness is we're all moving into this Christ consciousness, right? And the name in and of itself, the Christ consciousness, because remember, there's actually a lot of people who believe, a lot of messianic teachers and teachers of the word that believe that when the anti-Messiah comes, he's going to reveal himself as Jesus Christ. So when this New Age goes and teaches about this Christ consciousness, it's actually leading them into this sort of this alien agenda that is going to be teaching this melding of all religions together. It leads them down a path to be deceived, is what it does. So I think I've gone a little over the time that I wanted to spend on this, but I just want to encourage you to really hone in your knowledge of this subject, so that you're able to verbalize it to other people when you're trying to go fishing. When you're fishing and trying to bring in a harvest, just hone in your skills on this subject so that you can really witness to these unbelievers. That's what my parents are into, is the Christ consciousness. They also believe they are starseed, and they are excited for spaceships to come. Oh my gosh, Marissa. I love that name, Marissa. That's my name. And you spell it just like mine. I never see anybody else's name spelled that way. When I do see Marissa, which is almost never, it's usually with one S, and I use 2 S's, so that's interesting. That actually breaks my heart, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. This Christ consciousness, and yeah, the spaceships are going to, these star beings are going to bring about this new age of peace and love and, everything else that New Age teaches. Marissa, I'm going to say a prayer for your parents. And I hope that you will be able to have this conversation with them and help them understand who these beings really are. I hope that you'll be able to break down for them, or maybe you have already. I mean, I don't know. I hope you'll be able to have this conversation with them, because once you tie it all in, and once you see that, oh, the Bible talks about fallen angels. Oh, the Bible talks about these sons of God mating with humans, and they created giants, and those were the men of old. And that's who God was coming after. That's who God destroyed in the flood. That's who God is going to destroy again. Because remember, God said he's not going to destroy the earth again with water. He promised he would never bring another flood. But it does say the earth is going to be destroyed by fire. This time around, it's going to be fire. So when you understand why God has to do that, then people will understand that God is not a vengeful God. He is a merciful God. They overdosed on red pill and washed it down with all the Kool-Aid. They grew up in the truth. So that is just awful. Oh no. That is heartbreaking. That is well, you know, actually, Marissa, have you ever seen do you know who Trey Smith is? Have you ever seen any of his videos? If not, private message me. I want to send you a copy. I want to send you a copy of 2 of his videos. It's actually one video that has 2 parts. And private message me if you have never seen Trey Smith. Yes, I have a bunch. Okay. Have your parents ever seen the Noah videos that Trey Smith made? I used to give those away was it last year or a couple years ago? I gave a bunch of them away because I just wanted people to just like show them to their family. Just like show it to everybody, because he really does a good job in the video of explaining, you know, from the times of Noah, what was going on, how that came down into, you know, Egyptology, the Egyptian gods and the Babylonian gods, and how that came down into Rome and Greek and all of this, and where we are today. And have your parents seen the video, the Noah video that Trey Smith did? I would be curious if they have. I don't know. I will have to ask them. The Noah video is amazing. Yeah, I made copies of it and just gave it to everybody because I just wanted as many people to see it, because it talks about exactly what I'm talking about. But he's able to put it in video format that it goes over everything. It goes over the Nephilim, the giants, the, you know, the skeletal finds, the archaeological finds that we have. If anybody's interested and has not seen the Trey Smith Noah videos and you would like a copy, private message me with your address and I will send you a copy myself for free. The only thing I ask is that you promise to show it to other people. That's the only cost that it will cost, is that you will show it to other people, that you'll show it to your family, that you'll show it to your friends, and maybe even that you'll make copies and give them out to other people. Because it does, and then it takes you through to the whole alien agenda and, you know, where we are today. So it's a 2 CD video that I think it just says it all right in those two CDs. So yeah, Marissa, I think it would be a good idea for you to, or somebody to send that to your parents and just say, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? Because, that your parents are the exact people that I'm kind of speaking about, because, that Christ consciousness, New Age movement is so strong and so big right now. There's so many people who are, and again, it's even infiltrating the Christian churches to such a degree that it's like It's no wonder that Yeshua said that even the elect could be deceived. And I just want you to make this part of your arsenal of how you're able to talk to people about what's really happening today. Because we're in the last days. We're in the days of Noah. They need to know what's actually going on instead of this deception that's happening. Nobody's ever going to hear it if you don't say it. I will do that. I won't give up on them. I still can't believe they've fallen for it. Yeah, show them that video. Give them those videos and say, hey, watch this and tell me what you think. Because this explains where we were, the history of mankind, and why we are here where we are today. And why Yeshua said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns. And how all ancient religions go back to the fallen angels and the Nephilim, because they were the ones that started all ancient religions. Yep. So if anybody's interested in those DVDs, I think I still have some. If not, I can make them. That's the Trey Smith Noah videos, the DVDs. Private message me, send me your address, and I will send you a copy. Just promise me that you'll show it to other people and that you'll talk to people about this subject. Put this in your fishing tackle box and use it. Don't be afraid to talk about this, because now is the time. Okay? Amen? I know I said that we were going to finish our Leviticus study because we're studying in the book of Leviticus. We're halfway through Leviticus. Well, I want to get through the rest of Leviticus. However, and I'm also supposed to be doing the second video on the Lord is my shepherd that we did in the Keys to the Kingdom, Keys to the Garden group. I'm not going to do it in the Keys to the Garden group next time because doing it in the group, it's not delivered to as many people. So Facebook doesn't show it hardly to anybody. So I have to just do it on the regular Keys to the Kingdom page. But I will be doing that. It was supposed to be this coming Shabbat, but I'm actually going to have my niece for the weekend for her birthday. So I don't think I'm going to have time to do a video. If I do, I'll be on Shabbat. If not, next Tuesday, definitely. So, I hope this was helpful to you. Stay tuned in the news, because after today's meeting in Congress, it's just going to get more interesting from here, because that's part of what's happening. We're going to see a lot more come out, and you need to be ready to answer questions, because as all of this is coming out of the government, people are going to be looking for answers, and 9.9999999 out of 10 times, these people are going to be receiving answers from New Age, and they're going to be gravitating towards the idea that these are benevolent saviors from outer space. So I just want you to be ready to give them the truth of the matter. God bless you. I pray that each and every one of you will have the strength and the courage and the knowledge and the wisdom to harvest as many souls in these last days as you can. And it's just simply by speaking the truth. Bringing it up in conversation. Hey, did you hear about this? Oh my gosh, did you hear they were talking about UFOs in Congress yesterday? What do you think about that? You know, just start the conversation and then plant the seeds of truth. Okay? Amen? I'll let you know when we're doing the next video. In the meantime, God bless you. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may He make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may He lift up His countenance upon you and give you His shalom. So, Shabbat. I will see you Shabbat. More than likely. But shalom to you for now. Bye-bye.